lives. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So when I first stumbled into this, which we can talk about later if you want, when I first kind of stumbled into this, I thought this was just about telepathy, right? And that there were these individuals and their parents and teachers were claiming they could read minds. And as I start meeting more and more and more of these families, and again, like I said, teachers, it's not limited to just families, one thing that they started telling me was telepathy is just the tip of the iceberg. And I didn't know what that meant. What do you mean telepathy is the tip of the iceberg? And it's true, because I think whether or not its ability to see disease or illness in someone and be able to diagnose it before this person knows that there's something wrong, reading an aura and, saying that they can see a color around not just animals and humans, but plants, being able to speak multiple languages, even though you haven't been taught them, or playing instruments and knowing music, or being able to access almost any song and having perfect pitch, being able to visit people in dreams. And then, I think some of the more just like mind-altering, shocking things for me was how many non-speaking individuals have said that they are able to speak with people from the other side. And yeah, so it didn't just start with telepathy or end with telepathy. It's a plethora of things.
So do you think that this is an emerging aspect of human consciousness, or do you think perhaps this is something maybe we had before we were verbal that we've lost, but that lays dormant, like that we don't need it, so like a muscle, it atrophies?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think we all have these abilities. I think this is all part of us. And in the telepathy tapes, in episode 5 in particular, we get into animal communication through telepathy, and a story of elephants that knew when someone who was like in charge of their big game preserve had died, and they'd walk days to his house and did stay there for grieving, and then would come back every year on the day of his death. Just
Whoa.
Unbelievably beautiful stuff. Rupert Sheldrake has talked, has written at length, a brilliant Cambridge biologist, about dogs, experiments he's done that kind of show that dogs know when their owners are coming home, and sometimes cats. So this seems to be part and parcel of the animal kingdom, right? And many of us have had that experience of phone telepathy where, I was just thinking of someone and they call.
People like to dismiss that as being just coincidence, but why do people want to dismiss everything? Like, that's the problem. It's like, I think the real fear is being fooled. That's the fear, which is why the problem with any sort of telepathy or any sort of psychic ability, the problem is there's so many charlatans and so many people get duped.
Yeah.
And it's really common. It's so common. It's everywhere. You see these psychic palm reading signs everywhere you go. And because of that, it's in the realm forever of nonsense. And if you believe in nonsense, you're not a person to be taken seriously. So if you're a scientist and you're studying human neurochemistry and you're studying neuroscience, there's no way you're going to support this unless it's just beating you over the head with overwhelming evidence. And then perhaps you say, maybe there's something here.
I think that's changing, actually.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we look at in the telepathy tapes in episode 6, which we call our science episode, is this idea of materialism, which I'm sure you've heard of. This idea that, at least for the past few hundred years, that the reigning philosophy around how we interpret the world is only true if we can measure it and observe it, right? And that makes you seem foolish if you believe in something that can't be measured or observed, like a psi phenomenon like telepathy or precognition or dreams, being able to communicate with someone, or any of that stuff would be thrown out as being silly. And I think there's been a massive effort to make that true, right? That if you believe this or you're a scientist and you want to publish this, we're going to dismiss you or ridicule you just for even daring to ask that question. Research about this type of stuff has been dismissed because it's materialist, scientists who've for a long time run the journals.
Sure.
But there is something interesting here, which is that consciousness, we don't know where it comes from,
Yeah.
And so what, the brilliant scientist Dean Radin talks about in the telepathy tapes is that if you think of materialism as a pyramid, right, and the base of the pyramid and all the things that have built up our world, which are biology and physics and chemistry and all those things, those have rules and properties, and we shouldn't throw those out. Those are pretty much true. But currently at the top of the pyramid is consciousness, and we can't explain where that comes from and why it's there. But if you just take consciousness from the top and put it on the bottom, So that consciousness is the basis of all reality, right? That consciousness is fundamental. That everything is the product of our thoughts first. Then we can account for all this stuff. Then we can account for precognition or telepathy. And it's not that big of a change. It's just flipping kind of the order of the pyramid. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And so there's been a lot of scientists who have looked into near-death experience research, who've looked into the research around telepathy, who've looked into the research around precognition, and said, we can't dismiss this. This is happening. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence here. There's a lot of things that add up. So we're going to start the Academy of Post-Materialist Sciences, where we will take this stuff seriously, and we will look at the research, and we will advance science. And I tend to believe that there needs to be quite a few funerals, but I think in like 50 to 100 years, the scientists that were gripping on to the materialist paradigm, I really believe that that's going to be kind of like the flat earthers in the future. Like I think the scientists doing this are on the right side of history because
we have to account for it. We don't exactly know where it comes from. And there's a lot of people that think that the universe is formed through consciousness.
Yeah.
This is Thomas Campbell's take on things. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Yeah. He was a mind bender when I had him in here. I was like, wait, what are you saying exactly? Like, you have to listen to it 3 or 4 times, and then you have to. I told him, listen, let's stop here. We'll do it again because I'm going to have to absorb this.
Yeah.
But the concept is that essentially the universe is formulated through consciousness in some way, and that we're interacting with it through consciousness, and that it's not as real as we want to believe it is.
Yeah, I mean, and even if you just basic it down, right? Like this room, what came first, the room or the thought of the room? Everything in this room, it was a thought first.
Right.
Everything.
Right.
Everything on our planet was a thought first.
Well, everything that we've created.
Except for the planet itself.
Right. Yeah, I've always said that I think that ideas might be a life form, that they get into people's heads and then people manufacture physical objects out of these ideas, whether it's art. And I think that's one of the reasons why we like art so much.
Yeah. I mean, that's how this whole podcast started, I think, for me.
Sure.